It is a beautiful, beautiful summer day, and I'm just about to go cut the grass. I thought I'd have one of the beautiful May apples from the forest first as a little pick-me-up, energy boost. I'll just set this here for safekeeping until after the video is done. I wanted to tell you a little story that comes to me every time I'm cutting the grass here. But first I wanted to talk a little more about that May apple now that I think about it. This is the time to pick May apples if you are in the right part of the world for May apples, like here in southwestern Ontario. You want them to be nice and yellow, like that. Maybe even a little richer than that still. They need to be fully ripe, or else they'll give you a bad tummy ache. But once they're fully ripe like that, they're great. Very citrusy, really good. Look for them in the forest. That one right there came from under the Miracle Sisters chestnut tree. And you know what? That is a great segue to what I found under that Miracle Sisters chestnut while I was looking for May apples, right by my meditation bench there. I found a beautiful mushroom I've never seen in this forest before. It goes by a couple of different names, and the one that comes to mind for me is violet coral. And just look at the color. It's shockingly beautiful. And there you have it. The experience that I had one time when I was cutting my grass 30 years ago, roughly, was with my best friend who is gone now, unfortunately due to suicide. And he was sitting on the deck, similar to the deck that I'm sitting on right now, with a similar view, except the forest was not quite so massive, because it was a freshly planted young forest. I planted, I can't remember exactly, but I think it was something like 8,000 seedlings at the big studio back then. They must be very large now. And they were very small. I had planted them the year before. And so for me, cutting the grass at that time meant cutting 12 acres of grass between all of these rows of little trees, so that the grass and weeds wouldn't get so tall as to shade them out and then they would die. So it was basically a 2-day process for me to cut the grass back then. And Massimo came, and he was sitting on the deck, and I was far in the distance mowing the grass between these rows and rows and rows of young trees. He was studying for an exam in some engineering program he was taking. And as I was out there cutting the grass, sometimes I would be heading back towards the building, and I would actually be able to see if the position was just right in this massive area, to see him up on that deck, because it's an elevated deck, quite high. And I could see him enjoying the beauty, the tranquility, and it was helping him to focus on studying. Perhaps even the drone of the lawnmower was helping. And I remember the feeling of looking and seeing him benefiting from the domain that I had created. A sanctuary, if you will. Now this is a sanctuary. But the feeling that I got from seeing him within my domain, and I could just feel this gratitude from him. And now I have a similar sensation when I'm cutting down the hill by the pond. And I'm coming back towards the house and looking up the hill to see this deck, which is not elevated, it's only a few feet up, but from down at the pond, I'm looking up at it. And it reminds me of that feeling. It takes me back to that place, to that moment. And that moment had, there's a philosophical religious term for it, an ineffable quality, a quality that cannot be described. And it was also an eternal moment. Really one and the same. I'm saying the same thing, really. It's something that can't be explained, can't be described. But I feel it now. And I'm sure we all have these feelings. We all have these experiences that stay with us, so that when we are reminded of that particular experience, we're almost transported back to that moment, to that place, and feel the way that we did in that moment. Actually feel it, actually be there again. Even after 30 years. It's as real to me as this moment. I am in the middle of remastering a film that I was making a few years after that. It's a film that took almost 15 years for me to make. And it's about my brother and his experience of living in his head. And Massimo was in that film. And unfortunately, he chose to end his life before the film was completed. And there was one more scene that I had in mind for him. And then he was gone. I was working on the remastering of that film early this morning. And when I loaded up one of the scenes, there were various takes that had been shot. And just purely by accident, I clicked on one of the unused files. And the first frame had him laughing, his mouth wide open. He was just howling, screaming with laughter. He was so happy. People tend to be happy around my brother George, who's clad in silver in that shot. And that day was filled with these kinds of moments when we were filming. And it's unfortunate how many people I know who are in great difficulty right now And more than one of them has asked me how I handle being alone like this. Always alone, eternally alone in this sacred forest. Just waiting to eat that mayapple. And that's it. There you go. I answered my own question. It's having gratitude for the simple things and realizing that every moment, everyone can be an eternal moment with that ineffable experience. Especially, and here's the paradox, with the strangeness of the time that we're living in right now, where society is on the brink of annihilation, whether it's from outright military nonsense with these superpowers and all of these super dictators who want to rule the world and tell you what to do and when to do it, or from AI, which isn't actually intelligent at all. I think of the I as being ignorance, artificial ignorance. But as we all know, a little bit of knowledge is just enough to be the most dangerous. And that's what we are building. But there are so many ways that we are teetering on the brink of self-destruction, and this is a factor in the depression of so many people today. Perhaps this is how I should have started this video. But I've already lost 99.9% of you anyways. But for the 1 or 2 who remain, this is the good part. The paradox of us living in this time where it seems almost certain that we are going to be wiped out very soon is that knowledge can free you. Because first of all, this is no different than any other time in human history. No different at all. Look back to the earliest well, I can't say for sure the earliest, but in this context, let's say the earliest in the Bible, the earliest story, Cain and Abel. Here we have 2 talking monkeys who happen to be brothers, and one kills the other. Ta-da! Humanity, welcome. This is no different, just on a larger scale. Instead of one brother killing another, it's one brother from another mother wanting to kill billions. Perhaps it makes their little ego seem a little less ego, a little less little. And wouldn't it be better if it was a little less ego? We could all do with a little less ego. So that's the one aspect. So far, so obvious. But the more important, especially the more useful to those of us who are suffering right now, is the importance that this puts on this moment, so that it makes it easier. If you stay focused, as counterintuitive as this sounds, if you stay focused on the hopelessness, the bleakness of the global situation, you can use that to your benefit, because it makes it easier to see the beauty of every moment, to see what makes this moment so special, because the odds are pretty good that there aren't that many more. And the closer you get to the end, imagine if you were right now on your deathbed, about to take your last breath. Don't you think you would want that breath to last as long as possible if you knew that it was the very last one you would ever take? Wouldn't you savor it? Wouldn't you treasure it? Wouldn't you want it to be the greatest breath you ever took? Not just the ultimate one? So do that. Think to yourself that chances are that this is going to be the last day of human existence on this planet. It's not a non-zero probability. In fact, I'd say it's pretty far from zero. And the best part is, each day that probability goes up. So use that to your advantage. Help to make this moment a sacred one. Wherever you are, whatever your circumstances, look at what you have to be thankful for, even if it's nothing more than your next breath. Because one day, life is beautiful. Life is abundant. The forest tells me that every day. Right here in one of my gardens, right beside the deck, there are countless bees pollinating the tomatillos. I just had a wonderful lunch filled with so many freshly picked ingredients from here in my domain. The abundance takes us back to the chestnut tree where I began, with this year's beautiful crop far overhead in the Miracle Sisters chestnut tree. I've worked so hard to help that tree, and it rewards me every year a little more. And underneath it, there's more than just the mayaples and those wonderful new violet mushrooms that I just spotted. I also saw Indian pipe and another violet mushroom that I don't know yet. Beauty abounds. Nature wants to be abundant. Nature wants life to thrive. Who are we to go against nature?